Welcome to Your Financial Maven, where we talk all about understanding your money. I'm so glad you're here. I'm Samantha Mittman-Besnoff, certified public accountant. I've been in the accounting field for over 30 years, and I absolutely love sharing my knowledge all about your financial empowerment. Enjoy the podcast. Welcome to the latest episode of Your Financial Maven. I'm Samantha Besnoff, and I'm so excited to have my guest on today, Catherine Lang-Cline. We are going to have a fun discussion, a very vibrant discussion about helping women in leadership roles and dealing with business and things like that. Catherine is an award-winning CEO. You built your business. You, I guess, did your business for 20 years. You decided, you know what, I'm going to step away. I'm going to sell it and moved on. But you didn't move out of the picture. You kind of grew in your journey, and we're going to talk about that today. You actually wrote a book called The Rules of the Game for Women in Business. It's a very straight shooting guide for women who are ready to stop playing small and learn the real rules and start winning. So I'm really excited to talk about that and talk about your journey. Like I said, you are award winning. You had an award called the Most Admired CEO. I love that. I absolutely love that. And you really learned how the game worked running your business and being that CEO and being able with your energy and your excitement to share that with us today here on Your Financial Maven. So Catherine, welcome.
Thank you so much. And thank you for the introduction. I think we've covered everything.
Good. Yes. I tried, I didn't want to read the whole thing, but I wanted to make sure I grasped, the important parts.
Did a perfect job.
Yes. So before I get started talking about your book and about your journey, and I ask all my guests this, what is money?
Oh, money is freedom. I mean, I think a lot of people think it's happiness, but I don't think that's necessarily true, because you can have a lot of money and be miserable, but it does provide freedom of a lot of things. It's freedom from, whether or not you can pay your bills and buy your groceries and put your kids through school and things like that. So that is my one word.
I love it. And you're right. I know personally of experiences with family members, extended family members who have had a lot of money and a lot of success, and they still weren't happy. There were still things that it wasn't that they didn't enjoy having the money, right? They had comfortableness, but it led to other things. So I think having that idea of freedom is great and understanding money. And I just, on a side note, in case anybody sees, I had surgery a few days ago. So if they see the hand come by, you guys can ignore it. But just so you know, dealing with something, I actually went from November all the way through tax season. And I told the doctor, because I knew I wouldn't be able to really use my hand for 2 weeks. I said, We're doing it after tax season.
All right.
We waited. Yes, had that done. So I want to talk about your book, The Rules of the Game for Women in Business, and what inspired you to write this book, and kind of some of the rules and what you've learned, not only while you're writing the book, but you do go out and do speaking engagements. You share this knowledge. So I'd love to hear more about that.
Yeah, it was a case of where in the 20 years that I did have my business, I was also occasionally mentoring some people or advising, minor coaching, if you will. And after I sold my business, some people were like, I would love to sit with you and have some coffee, maybe. And then people are saying, well, you should be a coach. You should be a coach. I did that for a very short period of time, but then I realized I was repeating myself a lot.
Yeah.
And I thought there's things here that women need to know. And it's very easy to me after my journey. So I'm like, I can't just walk away from this. I have to write things down. So now more women can see what I did, some of the hurdles that I came over. And the concept of the book really is, after being in business, I realized in order to get ahead, you have to play it a little bit like a game. Men started business first. That's nothing against them. It's just the way that it is. And they were able to write all the rules before we could enter the room. And women showed up on the scene thinking that we can be, kind and helpful and nurturing, which are the definite strengths of women. But it's an entirely different game. The rules are completely different. And it's
100%.
It's not
they really are
an us versus them thing. It's just different. And once I realized that, and I started, using language that they use, posturing in ways that they would, interrupting when they would interrupt me, I realized, this is the game, and this is how I'm going to play. And therefore, that helped me become a better team player for them. And they invited me to be on the team. I want you to on my leadership board, or on my board in general, or I want you to help me with this thing. it was all because I was proving that I understood how to play the game and I was a good team player.
Love it. I love it. And you're right. I mean, it's hard, right? We as women don't necessarily want to have to play that role, want to have to play that game because we might not agree with how they're going about that game. But both you and I, growing up in an area or an era time frame, when I started accounting, women worked really hard to get to where they were in public accounting, becoming partners, very few and far between when I started over 30 years ago. I was at a public accounting firm that had one woman partner in the 30 partners of the firm. So she played the game because she got to where she was. But I think over time, I think it's great. But how do you add that woman piece to it? What are the rules or the things that you help women still be women, right? And believe in what they believe in, but help them get to that point where they can be leaders?
Yeah, I think for the most part, men do like women in the room. I think they obviously love their buddy system. We all like to hang around with people that are like us.
Right.
But when you meet the certain people they are different, but they somehow still click with you because oh, you get me. That's really kind of the key. It's like, I understand what it's like to be a CEO when I'm talking to a male CEO because that part is all the same.
Right.
We all deal with teams and we all deal with HR issues and we all deal with things like that. So if you just kind of explain, work with that common knowledge and have the understanding that we're all there to win in some way. So while women may think some of the rules are, maybe a little uncomfortable, if you have kind of in the back of your mind is, oh, he's playing to win. And his tactics might be a little bit different, but somehow we can all win together if we just do this instead of this or nudge this over here. I think it's something that I'm maybe more comfortable with. Still the objective. I think in the back of our minds as women, we'll all want everybody to win, for the most part too. And they're playing for their team to win too, but their mindset's a little bit different. It's like, I want to be wealthy. I want to be president. I want to be, the top of my game. That's always a little bit of their strategy or part of their playbook, if you will, where women like to lift up everybody, and we're always the biggest check writers for donations. And we're always, coaching people and helping others and elevating others. So I like to advise women for just a little bit, play for yourself. Plan when you have an overage, if you had a great year and it's profitable, hey, how about if you save some of that money versus how am I going to distribute this among the team or what big check can I write to help somebody else? And that's all okay. But if you're not working or owning a business to eventually want to retire in a very comfortable manner, then you're not doing it right. And it's simple as that, because I've run into so many women that either run into divorce or they close their business because they can't sell it.
Right.
And they didn't save anything. They didn't put anything into an IRA or anything. And they're stuck, and they have to keep working in some capacity. But what I'm trying to preach is like, you can take care of others too. But think about how many more people you can take care of if you're super profitable too.
100%. 100%. I mean, it's interesting. I did work in corporate accounting for a year. It was not my thing. I mean, I've done public, I've done nonprofit government. I'm on my own now. Corporate I did for a year and it was cutthroat. I mean, you're talking in the mid 1990s. And honestly, one of the other women I worked with, I found sometimes to be more cutthroat than some of the men. But I think now that I look back at it, she was, early on ascribing to kind of what you're trying to say is it wasn't that she didn't care about me or other staff, but she was trying to focus on herself to establish herself. And she wasn't the reason I was like, I didn't like corporate. I just didn't like what I was doing. I was converting currency from foreign to US dollars. And I didn't feel like I was really using my accounting skills.
Yeah.
But I did observe that. And it was so intriguing because we did have a female CFO at the time. And also to see how, she was very caring to her staff, but boy, she got her mindset on something. It was like, this is why I'm doing it.
And I'm trying to erase that stigma of that being such a weird thing to behold. Because I can do that all day long. You could have 10 guys, doing that. You're like, oh, well, he's clearly just a good business person. But when a woman does it, it's just like, oh, what's her problem?
And you bring that up. I was going to ask this later on, but you're bringing it up now about women trying to be heard in the conference room, those opportunities at the table and they are viewed as being interrupted or overlooked, or maybe she's a bitch, right? Like she's coming in here, bull in a china shop. But, how do you help women to kind of change that narrative that, yeah, they're coming in there because they have ideas and they want to be heard, but that stigma of, oh, she doesn't know what she's doing, or she's just so obnoxious that we don't want to hear from her. How do you work with your clients or tell women what they can do to kind of push that aside?
There is a little bit of a strategy to that as well. And I like to compare it to if you're watching maybe like a rugby game or soccer or basketball, and everybody's fighting for the ball. I mean, there's a guy who's dribbling, and he thinks he's heading for the hoop, and some guy comes along and just snatches it away, and he's heading the other direction, and he's pissed.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's the same way that it is in the boardroom too, or in a meeting where you're sailing what you think are going to be, putting up a great point, and somebody steals the ball away. Your job is to try and get that ball back, or maybe keep them from scoring. And because that was your idea to begin with. And again, all the guys are playing that way, but the women get offended, they get hurt, and I think they start being seen as a bitch when they start getting really defensive about that.
Right.
And in some cases, I'll just keep talking if somebody's talking over me, or wait till they take a breath, and then I start talking. I'll start taking notes. So I'm like, I'm going to make sure I mention this when this guy stops talking.
Right.
And because I think we'd be the same way too. If someone addressed you with, "Oh my God, you interrupted me, how rude," you'd be like, "What?" But if you said something along, like, I see where you're going with this, and that's what I was trying to say, or I like that you carried that idea, because now let's go back to, or you're close to what I wanted to say. Just keep looping it back to yourself.
Right. Redirecting it, right? Like,
redirect it so you finish your thought, and it's not done in a form of panic. It's talking about really about to anybody. It's not super focused because they've already run. So you're like, okay, great. Let's go back to this. And it's like, I know we went down this road, but I want to get back to my point, and just make those notes so you don't forget, or you don't get offended. Right. But it is just about that game. That is how they're all playing. And we have to do it the same way. And we cannot do it with any sort of anger or angst. Or you just fold up your arms and just say, well, there's let me talk today, because guess what? They see you gave up. They see that you don't know how to play the game. They see that you're now willing to push your ideas forward. And the opposite can happen too when you're too pushy with that. I like to start building the consensus up before you basically say exactly what you want to do.
Yeah.
And there's some cases too, we have to kind of convince people this is the right answer by asking them questions. So there's a lot, like I said, I have a chapter on this, on how to handle some of that. And I dealt with it, and I never felt offended or hurt, but I came kind of in with that idea because that's what I have always heard.
Right.
So I would also tell people to kind of give it a little bit of breath to see if this room is exactly like you've heard about, or if it's not. I've heard some women just basically say, you know what, I just like to sit back and observe, and then I'll contribute when I think I have something to say. I think you're already starting to discount yourself by putting yourself in the back seat and saying, I'm going to sit here on the bench until somebody decides to call on me, or if I see something, then I might say something.
I mean, it's hard, right? You think, for women, it can be hard, right? I consider myself introvert, extrovert. And when I'm in social settings, especially networking, I've worked really hard to kind of, guys just go up and shake your hand and say hi to you. And it's hard and it's very intimidating, but I've worked on that. And I think you're right. The emotion, it's not to say you can't have emotion, but you have to learn how to take that as not personal. Right. And just have your passion, but you can't take that personal.
Because it isn't. It really isn't.
It really isn't. And I agree with you. And it is hard, right? It is very hard. And I think women can do it and they should do it, even if they're not in the corporate world.
It's really the only way to kind of break through from one level to get to that higher level sort of thing. It's to just, like I said, be in it and look like you know what the heck you're doing. And some of that just comes with practice. And I have some of that in my book as well, where I talk about, networking and some things you can say when you get a little tongue tied, or how you can be a little bit better working a room when nobody's there. We've all had the pleasure, I think, as a woman, to walk into a meeting and you're the only woman there. So, what do you say at that point? And just kind of as a little bit of a footnote, I go into a little bit deeper on this, but I always like to think of it a little more of how I act maybe as at a party or something versus a meeting, because a meeting seems so formal. But if you walk into a party and you see people, you're like, hey, how you doing?
Right.
That changes everything, versus I'd like to introduce myself and I am,
yes,
Catherine and I'm a CEO, just kind of that change, that internal messaging you have makes it just so much easier. And and they usually reciprocate.
Yeah, 100%. And you're right. It is hard. It can be very intimidating when you're the only woman in the room, or even if you're not, and how men react. I've had situations recently where I'm dealing with people in the accounting field who are younger than me, but from a leadership perspective where they're working, they're higher than me. They might be a partner or a CEO. And I've had to deal with how they look down at me because I work for myself and I do accounting, I do tax, I do the financial education, the podcast. And I've had to change that narrative with them to say, just because I'm not in public accounting doesn't mean I don't know what I'm talking about. I have 30 plus years of experience from a couple of these guys who just recently became partner and they're in their late 30s. I have a seat at this table, and it's how do you, like you said, react and get yourself in there to say, just because I might not be doing what you're doing doesn't mean I don't know what I'm talking about.
Right. And honestly, to a certain degree, I think sometimes those people get a little bit jealous too, because you are on your own doing it. They're kind of stuck to a desk, if you will. And,
I agree.
The one thing that, somebody had told me, and it was really, really helpful, is that, well, there's a couple of things. The first one is I met somebody, I hand him my business card, and I say, oh, and this is when I first started my business. And it says something like I was a director of marketing. And he said, I thought you owned it. And I was like, yeah, I do. And he goes, well, then why doesn't it say president or owner? And I'm like, oh, because for me, when I was working in corporate, being a director was always my aim. Right. And I saw, I get to give myself the title of director, but I never thought about president or CEO. Yeah. And then the next person who I ran into, I said, I'm really nervous, pretty much like what you're saying. And they're like, well, why are you nervous? You're the CEO of your own company.
Yeah.
And you're at the same level as them, if not higher. You said these people are higher, but you are a CEO of your own company. So if you come off with that attitude versus thinking that they're higher up in some way, or how do I talk to this person? It's like, no, we're the same. There's always a person, I'd always look for the CEOs in the room, because after he said that, okay, I'm a CEO, I got to look for the CEOs in the room. And I tried it, and it worked. They were like, oh, well, that's really cool, and you start your own business. That's always said sometimes there's a little bit of jealousy too, because if they didn't start their own business, they were like, oh, that must be great just to, be your own boss. I'm like, what? It's awesome.
Yes. I you know what? In almost 13 years, September will be 13 years on my own. And I agree with you. Don't get me wrong, right? Owning your own business has its ups and downs. Absolutely. It always will.
Absolutely.
But I do agree with you. When I do talk to people, I'm like, yeah, I'm a CPA and I own my own business. I just really share that. And I do think that some people have some jealousy because they're like, wow, she's really doing this. And it's that flexibility, that ability to do it. But it also means kind of still learning how to be a leader, right? I work for myself. There's no other staff. It's me, myself, and I. And so sometimes I feel like I'm in that void. So talking with you, I'm going to actually check out your book because I think this is fabulous. And having these conversations, I think, are important as women, because just because you own your own business or you're doing something for yourself doesn't mean you should give up on learning how to lead and present yourself to people.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
You've got to be able to do that.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I would really encourage anybody who has, even if you're the sole person, this is one of the things that I did too, is like myself and one other person, I would always refer to it as the company, and it is us and that sort of thing. And that it didn't matter if I was a solopreneur or whatever, or it's two people, just like my company does this. I'm the president of Portfolio Creative. That was my company.
Right.
And I, we do this, and this, and we can help you do this. And it was, a little more of a attention getter than even, saying, which I heard a lot, I have a small boutique company, or it's just me, or things like that. Because if you want to, especially go for the big fish, they're not going to want the one person. Because if something happens to you,
of course,
who's going to help their stuff? But if you give some sort of illusion that there's this team behind you.
I agree. There's that, nervousness of succession planning and what do I do for my clients? And those are things I've started to think about as I'm trying to shift a bit from the whole tax and accounting. And I want to do more of the, speaking and the workshops. And because I think financial education is important. I think, and this, this to me, being a leader and understanding that game is part of that too, because you have to be able to, at some point, probably present yourself, let's say, to investors, or getting yourself in front of that company to take them on as a client. And I think it's so very valuable in that regards.
Right.
And that's why we're talking, because I think,
exactly.
This is, what we need to do.
And
but
we have to do with that, like where they have absolutely, no question that you can handle it, because you are going up against some of the bigger people out there. But what is it that makes you special? What is it that makes your experience, different than what theirs is? And you could say, I mean, for me, I started this company based on that I was in marketing for probably like about 15, 16 years,
Wow.
both as a freelancer and working for a large corporation. So when I went to other people saying that I could find talent for them, I knew exactly what they were looking for. And that's what made us different than any other staffing company. It's like, you need to use us because we get you. And that's the message that, everybody can have. If you are, a chocolate maker, you just say, you know what? I love chocolate too. So I make chocolate for people that love chocolate.
That's right.
And automatically you're like, oh, well, I want to try your chocolate.
You're like, oh, can I have some of that? I would definitely do that. So that kind of brings me to my next question about building your company, that journey of what made you decide to go out on your own and kind of understanding that leadership, and really things that while you're in the corporate world working for others that maybe you didn't pick up on, that you've seen, and yes, you were in your business for 20 years, you decided to sell it, step away, but that's not necessarily a failure or a bad thing either. It's kind of that journey. So I'd love to hear more about your journey from your business, the ground up, and kind of where you went with it.
Yeah, as marketing is always like a pretty volatile field to be in, because, you're first hired, last hired, first fired, and especially large corporations. So I freelance a lot. I work for a number of companies, a number of Fortune 500 companies, a number of small ones. And especially in the large companies, I got a lot of experience, a lot of education. There are some that I thought, like, this is like better than a master's degree, because I learned about spreadsheets. And as a marketing person, we drew pretty pictures and said cool lines. Right. But to have that depth on someone else's dime, basically, I learned a lot. And because I was going back and forth, I wasn't really feeling like I was at home anywhere. Somebody came up, proposed to me, have you ever thought about? And I was like, no, but you know what? Why not? Why not try it? We'll see what happens. I'll give myself 6 months and we'll see if that works. And 20 years later, it was still working.
Amazing. Amazing.
But it was really about, the timing just seemed to be really right. I did not want to work for somebody else again.
I agree.
At least, especially now that you've had this company for so long, then it's like almost impossible to go back.
It is. I tell my husband that all the time. He's like, we talk, we have a kid still in college, and he's like, oh, maybe you should go work for someone else. You don't have to deal with all this. I said, I can't do that. No. I can't.
And I want to just tell people, there is something magical about going to work for somebody else, and the check just shows up in your account.
100%.
Without any worry.
100%. Just not for me.
That's why I said, like, the timing was right. I felt like I was just kind of at a crossroads. I just recently gotten divorced. I didn't have any children. So I could live lean and mean for a while until I could figure this out. And, that there's a whole thought process that goes behind that, because when you do start a business, obviously your salary changes. So I advise people that what's the least amount you could live on. And it's amazing what you can live on compared to what you make, because I was like, where did the heck all the money go?
I agree. I mean, I think people don't realize, and that's one of the things I talk about is, if you know your money, if you know what you're bringing in, and you know the expenses that you absolutely have to pay and go out the door, you'll have a better understanding of that.
Oh, yeah.
Right? So date your money once a month. Take the time to review it, because like you said, you'd be surprised. People could actually, while they're transitioning, if they choose to go out on their own, what they can and can't do.
Yeah. And that's a great example too of, when I tell people how to save as well. It's like, do you really need those Gucci shoes? Or right. What if you invested it? Even if it's a couple $100, it'll make a huge, huge, huge difference.
Huge difference.
Because for me, after my divorce, I really didn't have anything. I had to start over again at 35. And just trying to be so careful about always making sure I put something back in there, because I knew I would have to retire eventually. Yeah. I'll move a little bit forward to like how I was able to kind of retire early by selling the business. But having grown it, having done all the things that I wanted to really kind of accomplish, and with that, there was a recession and there was a pandemic. And there was, AI was now coming out. And I thought to myself, do I really want to go up head to head with this AI thing in a marketing space? Or is it time to just do something else? Because for me, I am a BFA. I have an art degree. I was in marketing. And, and then now I was a staffing person. And I'm like, I think I would need to kind of go back to my roots a little bit. And seemed to be a good time to sell the business too, because that's a little bit of a worth mentioning as well, as when you have a company like this, always build it to be sold. And that includes making sure that you're not the only one that's running it, that you have people to hand things off to, that there's some value in it. And as you know, businesses go up and down when it comes to pricing. So it was at a good point to sell. So we're like, let's just see what happens. The good news is, we can sell it, and then I will have enough money until my IRAs kick in, or we don't.
Right. Right.
Then I got to come up with something else. But I thought it was at least worth a shot with that sort of timing. And we found a great company to merge with that our culture. And also, too, somebody who could help bridge that gap with the AI, because they were more IT left brain thinkers, we're all the right brain thinkers. So since they're all starting to become one, I think it works out well in that regard. Yeah. So with that, I got to, like I said, then I started, saying, I just feel like I got something else to say. So I started mentoring some people. Then I was like, okay, wait a minute. Let me just write a book. And the book can live forever. And then if I truly want to retire, then so be it.
Yeah, no, I love it. And you're right. People with the way the economy is going right now, and, like my youngest is going to be graduating within the next year from college, and he's trying to find a job in engineering. It's hard. And my oldest, when he graduated 2 years ago, he had a hard time finding a job as well. I mean, he has a job. He's doing well now, but it is very hard in these times of trying to figure out, what to do. And AI, of course, is this whole big thing. But I think being able to have the leadership skills, being able to, whether you work for somebody and have those leadership skills or you're on your own, I think on some level, no matter whether there's AI or technology, you still have to be able to sell your product or sell who you are, your vision, your knowledge, because on some level, I don't think AI is ever going to 100% take over everything. I just don't see that. Doesn't mean it won't, but I don't see that, because you still need that human connection. And you still need to have the ideas and things like that.
Yes. And I mean, and who's to say that maybe it doesn't start learning that, but the way that it kind of is panning out is that it is fantastic for doing a lot of these mundane sort of things, repetition 100%. Sort of things.
Yes.
And that initially, hits the heart of like anybody who has a calling company, like you do cold calls or certain things that don't necessarily involve ideas and leadership and things like that. Because essentially the way that it is set up right now is it picks up things that have already been done. So if you want anything new and innovative, it's not going to be there. And, snappy new ideas. I come up with pretty good ideas. I mean, I like to help it helps me kind of sort my thoughts sometimes, because I could be all over the map when it comes to my ideas. Like, can you just put this in bullet points so I even understand myself? And it'll do that for me. But as far as what the idea is, I mean, that can always be all yours. And the other thing I want to mention, when I was talking to some of the people that we worked with when I had the company with AI, it reminds me a lot of when computers and especially the Macintosh took over.
Yes.
And everybody freaked out. And granted, a lot of people lost their jobs because those were no longer needed. However, if you knew how to use it, you were an asset. So if anything, that's worth a mention on any resume. If you have some knowledge, even a little bit of understanding of it, to say, I understand, or I've used AI for arts, that's going to be a standout for people.
Yeah, I agree. I think in the accounting world, there is some freak out about the whole AI and the processes and what are, kids coming out of college going to be able to do. And it's interesting because when I learned accounting, a lot of it was all manual. It was all doing it by hand, pen and paper. And even into the 2000s, early 2000s, it was still a lot of that. And I think from some level, you learn better that way. When you're writing things down, you learn better. So when I do talk to clients and I'm working with people, I'll still draw T accounts to explain how transactions go on both sides. I will still kind of sit there and handwrite. And so when I talk to even college kids and we talk about that, some of their professors are doing that. They're utilizing AI and they're utilizing technology, but they're also saying, but this is how we started and this is where we're going. And how do you make that difference? And I think a lot of it also is it does change what you do in the sense of you can be a leader, you can do analysis, data analysis, coming up with those ideas, but it'll save you time to doing all the manual stuff.
Exactly.
So I think from a leadership perspective, a woman perspective, I think we still have opportunities and there's still so much to do and we should embrace it and see what it can do for us.
Or just, if anything, just figure out how it can, help you. Or like the one thing that really kind of resonated with what you just said is like, you seem very adamant about people understanding their financials. Yes. And, AI will not do that. They will do it for you, but they will not explain it to you so much.
Right.
I want you to understand where your money's going.
You're not wrong about that. I didn't have it necessarily personally this tax season, but I had a lot of CPAs in a forum that we're in talk about how their clients put their tax stuff into AI and walked into the tax office with the stuff from ChatGPT to say, this is basically I should be getting a refund. And then the accountant's going, the CPA's like, okay, thank you. And then going through it and coming up with completely different result and having to explain that to the client. And I think it's important, I've been doing that for the last several years I do an audio to go with my review to the client so that they're understanding as they're going through it.
Oh, I love
Why am I getting a refund that's, $1,000 less than the prior year? And I think that part of it, that transparency, that interaction, that conversation is very, very important. And I think, in that regards, how do we interact then even when we're in the office, right? People are maybe still hybrid or remote or in the office. I'm sure that's changed the game a bit as well on how you work with women in leadership because we're still kind of dealing with that hybrid, right?
Oh, yeah.
You know, and a lot of the kids coming out of college are not necessarily in the office. They are working from home and they're not getting that dialogue. So
exactly.
Do you see, there are mistakes that can be made, women trying to become leaders. What are some of those mistakes that you're seeing more so now, I think, with our environment than maybe it was prior to COVID, 6 years ago? Or has it not changed?
I think it's changed because I think, and I was really kind of hopeful with this whole work from home thing because I would see people all the time have the task of raising children while trying to have a job. And, people would call in and just say, it's a snow day and I can't come in. The person is perfectly healthy. They could totally work. But what if, crazy idea, I work from home, and then I don't have to take a day off. I mean, so I was super excited about that. And I think it's starting to slip a little way from us in that, for whatever reason, people are like, no, I got to be looking at you. I got to make sure that you're.
I got to see you physically and touch you. I mean, not supposed to touch people, but like.
Exactly. But it is all trust. It's all trust based because I know for a fact that the people that had more liberties when I worked in corporate were the ones that everybody trusted. That person will get that done. So I think we can still hang on to that if you become to that. But if you're new, if you're new to a company, how do you prove that? So you might have to, put in some time to then say, maybe once in a while, I got a snow day, I got a sick kid or things like that. I think if anything, that has helped women exponentially. I do remember hearing stories about where, guys were the ones that wanted to really push going back to the office because they didn't want to be home, and not
my husband, though. He's been working from home for 6 years and he still has to go into the office occasionally. He's IT specialist. He works in the corporate world. He still has to go in, but he'd rather be home now. Because he's like, I'm in comfortable clothes. And if I have to be at a meeting, he's wearing the top part is the dressy shirt, whatever. And when he goes in, he's like, what am I going to wear?
Right. It's going to fit.
I mean, granted, our kids were older when COVID hit. My oldest was actually graduating high school in 2020. So that was a whole nother level. I had a small office 2 miles from my house. And I could have stayed at the office because it was just me. But then the kids were home. My husband was working, right? So you're right. It's the woman coming home and having to take that charge of that. So
I think that part works to our advantage. However, if you have those smaller children, and you're trying to get a leadership role, I mean, you got to be in. People do need to see the leader, I think, more than the followers, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And, you have to be out there and available and, like I said, just leading the charge. So, women have to kind of change their mindset as far as what is more important. And there's some that will say, this is the time that I'm raising my children, so this is the most important. So I'm just going to lay low. And then when they're in high school or something, I'm going to, go full in, or college or whatever, because it always seems like every year there's something else you want to be home for. But
yes and no. I agree with you. When I started, my kids were elementary school, intermediate school. My youngest also has a rare migraine disease. So my decision to go out on my own was not just because, my kids are young and I want to, be involved, because I pretty much, from the time my oldest was 1, still worked, still did stuff. But you're right. I still kind of took a step back. I didn't put myself out there till they got old enough that I could, go to more networking events, and not that my husband hasn't been involved. It's just like that balance. And I think that's important for leaders too. And I think on some level, that's where we can make mistakes too, is learning that it's okay to balance and opening our mouth and saying it's okay to balance.
Yes. And I do think that because of the way we're wired, women will take that weight on, hard. With both 100%. Hands. I started my business, and then a year later I had my daughter. And from the get-go, she was like in daycare, and we had to figure it out how it was going to work. And I talked to other moms who are kind of in that same situation. And I think, like I said, it's just a matter of how you are wired internally. For me, I knew I wanted to do this, and it was, how does she weave into this plan of mine? And for me, I was done at 5. I'm picking her up at 5, and I'm not showing up to work until 8. If something would come up, which I would very, very rarely allow have happen, because in my calendar, no meetings after 5. I mean, it's as simple as that. Or if it was a networking event, my husband could step in. I'm like, I got to go to an event. So we had a nice little system going. So it is absolutely positively possible to be in leadership and have small children. But again, the whole COVID, now we can work on Zoom thing does help women still stay engaged. Because the one thing that I would run into often when I would place talent is women would come with a resume and say, these 4 years I wasn't working, and now I want to get a job again.
And I agree with that, because right. We made the decision when we had our first son that I was going to be home for the full year, taking care of him. That was just a choice. We looked at our finances. We did the analysis of daycare at that time, and we just felt, for the first year, this is what we're going to do. And so, there's like a year gap that I had. Now, I was studying for my CPA license. Like, I still was doing things.
That's the key.
And still trying to stay involved. But I was also very blessed, because when I wanted to get back into the tax world, I had done all kinds of accounting. And when I ended up in the tax area, I fell in love with it. I know it's weird, right? Taxes, why would you fall in love with that? But it was just something that, to me, I could do. I found a local public accounting firm that allowed me to work 2 days a week in the office.
Perfect.
And then just do whatever I needed to do for tax prep. I could take work home, things like that. And my son at that point went into daycare twice a week. And some of that was, again, analyzing it. And it is hard, right? Not every woman can do that. But I think we shouldn't shame or, say to women, oh, you're a leader and you're doing this. And what about your kids? Like, every woman has to make the choice for themselves. And it's hard, right? It was hard because I was grasping the two worlds of stay-at-home mom and working, and getting judgment from the moms that were able to take their kids every day to play groups and this and that. And I'm like, well, no, 2 days a week I'm working. And that was just our choice. And I think that's also something we need to tell women, that if you leadership role or not, it's okay. You have to do what you have to do.
Right. And that's a thing too, that women have this comparison thing as well that men do not have. Men are like, you go for it, dude, and you get get all the money and get all the whatever. And women start getting stigmatized by making, choices like that. So I would always tell people, it's like, this is, your choice. And for example, I know some people that have started a business and they have children, or they're in corporate and they have children, and they have goals of their own while they're also being a mom. The ones that do take that route can work themselves to a place where, they have enough money to start trickling back down to the kids. They're going to have they're going to have no college loans. They will have, it better
You
than
hope.
I
College, let me tell you, have no loans or not, both of our kids, some of it was more of a having skin in the game. So I want you to have loans kind of thing. Right. But yeah, you're right. Having to put that money away.
The more money you have, the more you can help.
100%.
And there are some instances too, where if you're the woman in the relationship, then your career is going like gangbusters. Have a partner that is willing to help you shine too. Like, you know what, baby, you got this. And so I'm going to step up. I'm going to step up because, you're on fire right now. And then there could be that switches back, and then you have to then take on the other role too. So it's about also kind of building that team around you that wants to elevate you, delegating things that you're not good at or that you really hate doing. And then just make sure that you're always in that zone of genius that you're always in, so you can keep going forward. Like I said, then you get to make more money. Then maybe you can help your parents. You can help your kids. You can help, everybody. Childcare, it doesn't matter because you have the money for it. So yeah, it's just like a real change in mindset of how women should conduct.
I agree.
And like I said, it's a personal choice. I mean, that's
of course.
And it worked out pretty good. I suppose if it was miserable, then I would.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, it's hard, and you have to figure out that life balance. And honestly, even if it's not just having kids in your life, like we're at a time, it's a sandwich generation of your elderly parents. Now you could be dealing with that, and you're working and leading, and how do you manage all of that? That's kind of where I'm at, sandwiched between parents and kids, and trying to figure all that out. What are some of the harsh truths or things that some women, are doing or seeing that help them never get ahead? I mean, there are times I feel like I'm not ahead, right? I'm trying to get all these clients. I'm trying to build my business, the workshops and all. I feel like I'm trying to break through, and then it's like something happens. But what are some harsh truths that you've come across that maybe women don't see it, and maybe if they now know about it, they can get past that?
One of the biggest culprits is women get caught up with the voices from their past or the ones that are around them in the present. So for me, I started out, I'm not coming from a wealthy family. I know a lot of people that have not, but for me, for example, I wanted to go to college, and my parents would say, well, why would you want to do that? You can get a great job at the factory, just like we did. And, you'll get lots of money, and they were paid pretty well because they were there so long, but I never saw myself in that role. So I would have to first break through that. I need something else to break through that mindset. And then when you're in that mindset where you're starting to do well, you might have people around you that are like, oh, well, I see you got a new car. I don't know how you can afford that. Or this house is pretty big. How do you have time to clean it? So these are these little micro knockdowns that we get that say, maybe this house is too big, or maybe I should have something smaller. Maybe I shouldn't want as much because other people are telling you that. You have friends, for example, that, you're from, like, and I like to refer to this as like when you're trying to lose weight and then your friends aren't really helping you do that because they still want to keep drinking and partying. You're hanging around those same sort of people in your career, maybe that they are only this big, and you're like, I got to break free from these voices because I want more than this. So you have to really start hanging around with people that are at that level that you want to be at, and start hearing what they're saying and getting into that sort of those conversations.
But it's hard, right?
It's hard because
it is hard
to leave people behind. I hate to say, especially the ones that really are negative.
I agree.
So
I
in my first marriage, and I see this with other women too, where he had to be the breadwinner. And so therefore I could not make more money than him in his mind, or he would start getting, a little condescending to me because, oh, you think you're all that because you're now making more than me, sort of thing. And I know a lot of women that don't want to change that dynamic of, I can't make more than my husband because he's the breadwinner. He might be offended.
Well, and I think they're scared a little too, right? To be right. And it's okay, right? It's okay to be scared. It's okay.
It's not normal.
No, it's not, not to understand that. But I also think some of it is learning generationally from how your parents are. I sit and I have conversations with my mom sometimes, and she'll make comments like, oh, because dad does that. I'm like, okay, but you're your own person.
Right.
You can go do that. Like, just because dad's doing this or whatever, doesn't mean you can't do that. And I think you're right. I think the concept of making more money in men in general, right? Making more money than men in general, I think does set some, like, how could you afford that and do that? And maybe it's changing that narrative of we need to have more conversations around money and not shame people and not guilt people. And, some of it's mental blocks, right? Some of it's that, I have to get up, I have to do this. Whatever. But it is, I think you're right that those mindsets and leaving some of those people behind. It's hard.
It is. Like I said, but think about, am I still friends with everybody that I knew in grade school? Absolutely not. Because at that time, that was my posse. And then I had to move on to a different group and then a different group and a different group. And it is harder the older you get, but there's always somebody at that next level that is willing to accept you into the group, which is also kind of nice. And the true friends, the ones that are your cheerleaders that I like to refer to, they will always stay. Because, they're like, I'm going to hang on to her because, I want to get some of her mojo or whatever. And you could help raise them up too in some cases as well. But if there aren't people up for the ride, you start to cut yourself short because you feel like you have to make other people happy. But if you're always looking at what is that you want is always up front. And it's like you're either with me or you're against me. And I hope you like me when you see me as a CEO or as a VP versus, here in, the steno pool.
Right. I mean, you're right. And right. And I think that makes somebody a good leader or leading where they want to go, right? Because they're willing to having to get rid of the people or the dead weight or the things that are bringing you down. And it's hard because it's not something that once you do it, it's always going to be off to the side. There's always constantly things that occur for that. But I think that helps with leadership skills because you're able to kind of move yourself forward and get over that hump and find a way. A lot of, like you mentioned before, life coaching, a lot of different life coaching type of styles are coming out. I work with someone who's a CPA, but she's a life coach. She coaches accountants and CPAs. And, we meet once a month and have these conversations with a group of women about the different things that we're doing. And, imposter syndrome is a huge thing that right? Yeah. What is it that you're seeing with that? And how do you help women kind of say, hey, change that mindset?
That is all those little voices in your head that just keep coming back. Like, why Miss Fancy Pants would you want to do that? You're not going to do well or
right.
And
right. It's interesting. I've been doing the podcast now for 3 years. I am very excited. It's something that to get this information out. And when I started, it was kind of like, I started actually with a group of 10 other women. We had won a contest through iHeart and
awesome.
It was really cool. 10 up and coming women podcasters. And I've been doing it for 3 years now. And I think I'm the only one still doing it.
Interesting.
So we were with iHeart for about a year and a half. And then they didn't renew the contracts, which was fine. You want to become an independent podcaster. And I've done it because I still have a voice and I feel like that's my leadership in that regards to helping women and small businesses. But I still get that imposter syndrome. I still get that, like the little voices in my head and, you see this CPA doing this, and this, and you're trying to do that. And look, you're not getting anywhere. And then I have to take that step back and go, well, wait a minute. They're in a different market. They're in a different area. They might offer things a little differently than I do. They don't have this or I have that. It's a constant battle.
It is. And it's really kind of honing in too on what your real passion is too, because honestly, if it doesn't, bring you mega millions, if you're always working in that space, you're so happy too. And then I also truly believe if you're that passionate about some things as well, they do start becoming lucrative after a while because there's no other choice because it has to grow and it has to be bigger. And like for you, I mean, you could hold up like Brene Brown as some sort of an icon as far as, that's what I want to do. There's nothing wrong with walking towards that goal. I mean, you probably won't be a Brene Brown. I mean, I remember my icon at the beginning was like a Martha Stewart who had like an empire. It's like, I'm not going to have that empire, but if I follow some of the steps she took, I'm at least going to be a lot better off than I am right now. But it involves having a little bit of bravery and faith in yourself and tamping down that imposter syndrome, which, like I said, I talk about that a little bit in that we have essentially like 4 voices in our brains. And the one that brings out that imposter syndrome is the one that always wants us to be careful And that's the same voice that tells us not to keep dating that same guy. You know,
Right.
it's like, you remember you dated that, motorcycle rider before, and
Right.
you remember what happened last time. Or, the guy that never calls you back or whatever. And it warns you about that, but it will also keep you from doing things too. And like, you're not big enough for this room, or you shouldn't go over and talk to that person, or they're not going to want to talk to you. Once you start tuning into some of your other voices, the driven voices, for example, you're like, I'm just going to walk over there and I'm going to introduce myself. And what's the worst that can happen? Nothing.
Nothing, right? You're right.
Happen.
What's the worst that can happen? But you bring up a great point. And I think as being a leader, I think if it brings you joy and you're happy about this, and you don't walk in that room and go, oh, I got to do this again. Like, you are in your happy place, other things will fall into place.
Absolutely.
Other things will fall into line. And sometimes the journey is going to be a lot longer for you than maybe for somebody else. But if it brings you joy and you're happy,
right.
I think you can continue to do that.
They'll see your energy and they'll want to be a part of it. And that's how it starts, just rolling and rolling and rolling into something that's really kind of cool.
Yeah, I love that. This has been so awesome talking about leadership and having you on here. Thank you. Is there any last minute insight or tip or thing you'd like to share with my listeners about being leaders and stepping into that role?
Here's my book. It's orange.
Yes, I love that.
The rules of the game for women in business has all of this and more. But the one thing I would probably leave as just kind of a soundbite is, you only have one life. What do you want it to be? And if your dream is to serve others and always live in poverty, then you know what? God bless you.
Yeah, I agree. Listen,
but if you want a little more and you are fully capable of it, just really figure out what it is that you're really, really good at and keep going towards that. I know some people get really stuck in just like these low rung jobs and like, I'll never be able to break out of it. But just keep looking. What else can I be doing? Could I be a manager of the store? Could I, now that I have all this experience, can I apply it to here? So keep that fear kind of as a moving target all the time, just to say, I've learned something. Now what else can I do? And that's how it starts piling on. And the next thing you know a whole lot more than you did the day before.
I agree. So, Catherine, where can we find you? And do you have any other calls to action?
My website is CatherineLang-Cline.com. My book is available on all the places, Barnes & Noble, Amazon, a few of the bookstores around. And that's how to get a hold of me. I'm all the information there.
And I'll have all that in a little bio.
Definitely click in at LinkedIn. I post a lot of things there.
Wonderful.
And I'd love to connect with people there too.
Wonderful. And I'll have all your links and all that information in the little description for the podcast for the listeners to have. But thank you, Catherine, so much for joining us today.
This has been a very joyful experience.
Thank you. I'm excited. Wonderful. Follow, like, and subscribe to Your Financial Maven wherever you listen to your podcasts. And make sure that you leave your money stories or questions for me at www.yourfinancialmavenpodcast.com. I cannot wait to hear what you have to say about money. The purpose of this podcast is to provide general information on the subjects discussed. It is for educational, informational, and entertainment purposes only. It is not meant to resolve your specific financial needs or situations. Please consult with your CPA, tax, or financial professionals. Your Financial Maven is hosted and produced by Samantha M. Besnoff, CPA, and Your Financial Maven, LLC. Editing is done by Chris Zarnock of KM Zen Creative. Music is written, composed, and performed by Daniel Shore.